Alright, this is Henry again, and this is part 2 of my work in progress on the 1:100 scale Resin, Heavyarms and Sandrock. And already I've gone back on one of the things I said in part 1. I'm recording the segment not even 24 hours after recording the first work in progress video, and already I've made a change to my plan. Now basically, the problem was that I couldn't figure out a good way to make the knee joints and elbow joints on these two kits look good and have decent posability at the same time. Because when I did these kits 3 years ago, the first time, I gave the legs and elbows, I gave the whole kit posability, and I used aftermarket joints for the elbows, and I basically just scratch built my own knee joints. And the elbow joints had good posability, but they didn't look good, and the knee joints didn't have good posability, nor did they look good, so that didn't have anything going for them. And that was originally part of my reason for wanting to make these kits fixed pose, because I just couldn't figure out how to get the knee and elbow joints to work. All the other joints in the kits I had figured out. I can do those easy. And I kind of said to myself, if I can just figure out how to get the knees and elbows to work and look good and have decent posability at the same time, then I'll go all out and make them posable. Well, I finally got something figured out for the elbow and knee joints, so at this point I made the decision to go ahead and go all out and make the figures completely posable like I did before, but hopefully I'll do a bit of a better job this time. Now, originally I was going to do 3 work-in-progress videos for these kits, but now I'm going to make it 4. And the second work-in-progress is going to be covering installing all of the joints. Now, for the ankle joints on these guys, basically I've just got a little aftermarket ball joint taken from these Hobby Base Yellow Submarine joints, and then drilled out a hole and glued a polycap up in here, and it actually fits pretty tight. And I did the same exact thing for Heavyarms right there. The ankle armor on both of them is a little bit different though. Sandrock's ankle armor actually doesn't attach to anything. It just kind of sits on the ankle. It's just kind of, you know, free to move about willy-nilly. So that's how it's going to be. And Heavyarms ankle joint, I actually just put 2 small little pins down in here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it out and show you, but anyway, it's basically just on 2 small metal pins so it can go up and down. And again, polycap up in there, and it'll just pop right into place. Okay, now for the knees on both kits. Basically what I've done is I've taken the resin knee joint that came with the kit and put a small metal pin through the bottom and the top, right through there, and I realized that that's left a small little hole right there, but all I got to do is go in and fill that in with putty. And with that, I'm going to get almost a 180 on Sandrock. I know it looks kind of weird when it's bent, but my main concern was, does it look good when it's standing straight? And it does, so in that aspect I'm very pleased with it. Plus, I'm not really going to have Sandrock pulling off any of these kind of poses very much. And I used a little bit of glue to tighten it up so it is nice and tight. Doesn't really fall very much. So I think the knee joints are going to work out nicely. Heavyarms was a little bit different. I did the same thing to the bottom, but unfortunately there just wasn't enough room for movement in the top, so Heavyarms doesn't have a double jointed knee, he only has a single jointed knee, but it still bends about 90 degrees, so I'm happy with that. Now for the hips on both kits, I've basically just put a small polycap right there in the thighs. You can see I've got a lot of putty right there because there was a much larger joint in there the first time I did them, but I opted for a smaller polycap this time. And up inside the skirt armor, I take this side skirt off and see there's a little ball there. Never mind that hole, I'm going to have to fill that in. And it just pops on there, and there we go. I think that's going to work out nicely. Now for the skirt armor on both kits, I've used these Kotobukiya MSG parts This is the T-joint set. It's basically just a little runner of joints, and they're basically, if I can zoom in on this, maybe, they're just little joints that'll pivot up and down, and they got a little peg, and I just drew little holes. I can fit those in like so, and they'll be able to go up and down and rotate a bit, so I think those are going to work out quite nicely. For the waist joints, I've basically just used a metal rod, so there's no forward and back movement, but you've got pretty much 360 rotation at the waist. Now what I've done for the shoulders is I've basically used these Revoltech type joints. I've used these on my 1:144 scale Nightingale, and they worked out okay, but I think they're going to work out fine for these shoulders. They're nice and tight. There's really no looseness issues at all, so I think those are going to work out. On the elbow joints, I used the same exact technique I used on the knees, putting 2 small metal pins in there. And the elbow joints are actually going to be able to get a full 180-degree bend. So really nice mobility in those. And again, I'm going to have to put a little bit of putty in to fill those holes, but that'll be no biggie. And just got a small polycap in there for the wrist, and that's just a simple ball joint. And for Sandrock's backpack, shield, and heat shore tails, basically on the backpack I've got a hole here, peg here, that's just a piece of plastic, and inside there I've got 2 polycaps, which will quite easily support the 2 heat shore tails and hold them in pretty snugly. Now I've got a peg on the back of the shield, and that just attaches on like so. And it'll also attach onto the forearm as well as Sandrock's back, so we can do the cross crusher gimmick. Now I know Sandrock's been getting most of the attention so far in this video, so let's move on to Heavyarms. Basically I used all the same joint techniques on Heavyarms that I did on Sandrock, as far as the waist and the shoulders and the elbows and the wrists are all concerned. I forgot to mention the head, the neck is on a small polycap ball joint for both of them. But the main challenge for Heavyarms were these opening missile hatches and getting them to be openable and be lined up properly, because when I did these kits 3 years ago, they could open and close, but they weren't lined up properly at all. He had like this big gap between his chest hatches, and it was just really bad looking. But I think I pulled it off a little bit more successfully this time. Anyway, I used those same little aftermarket T-joints that I used for the skirt armor. Actually, I used even smaller ones for the opening hatches on the shoulders. And there's no missiles in there right now because you got to glue those in, but I'll glue those in when I do final assembly. So those can open. Likewise, I use the same things on the chest, so the chest can open. And again, I'll go back and glue in the Gatling guns in the chest later after it's painted. Now the missile pods on the legs were a challenge. Last time I did these kits, I had this really big hinge joint glued on right there, and again, it opened and closed, but it just looked really big and bulky and out of place and just didn't look good. So I wanted to try to make, rather than one big hinge, have 2 smaller hinges at the top and the bottom, and basically just run a metal pin through them. And I actually did that, and had the metal, little tiny metal pins and the pieces of ply plate with the holes drilled through them in place, and it was just, the parts were so tiny that I couldn't, I just couldn't see it working out. I mean, I just felt like if I breathed on them wrong, they were going to break. So I had to think of something different, and what I did was, rather than making it a hinge, it can open and close, but it's got kind of a plug-and-play feature here. If I can get it out. basically what I did is I took 2 metal pins and glued them inside the little door here. And it's got 2 small holes, which, I mean, are there, but they're small enough you can barely notice them. Especially once it's painted, you'll barely be able to see them roll because it'll all be gray inside there. And then you can simply plug them on the outside of the missile hatch to make it open. So it's not a hinge, but you can still display it open and closed. And like I said earlier, the holes are small enough that they're really not going to be very distracting at all, and I think that's going to work out a bit better than having ultra tiny little hinges to put these little doors on. And let's not forget Heavyarms Gatling gun, the gigantic double Gatling gun. I'm sure all of you are wondering, are the elbow joints and shoulder joints going to be strong enough to support this giant gun? And I think you'll find that the answer is yes. And once it's all said and done, I'm left with 2 fully articulated yet unpainted model kits of Gundam Sandrock and Gundam Heavyarms. And I think it's safe to say that the joint modifications went a lot better than they did 3 years ago when I first built these kits. So the real question now is, are the joints going to hold up during the painting and final assembly processes, and are they going to hold up over the years when they're sitting on my display shelf? So that's the real question here. So that about does it for part 2 of this work in progress. And just make sure to come back for part 3, and that's going to be uncharted territory for me, because I'm going to attempt, and I stress the word attempt, to make resin recasts of some of these parts so I can convert both Sandrock and Heavyarms between their normal type and Kai versions, or space type. So that about does it for this video, and with that, I'll see you guys next time.